The last customer of the day asked for cherry pie. Marla Jenkins wiped her hands on the front of her apron, the same one she'd worn for 16 years, the one with the stitched blue heart her daughter had sewn on before leaving town for good, and slid the final slice onto a plate. The boy couldn't have been more than 16, all elbows and restless glances. He didn't smile, didn't say thank you, just dropped a 5, grabbed the plate, and walked out. She didn't blame him. It wasn't that kind of town, and this wasn't that kind of place. The Dixie Belle Diner sat at the edge of a road no one wanted to be on a tired stretch of highway between somewhere forgotten and somewhere no better. The linoleum tiles were cracked. The jukebox hadn't played in 3 years, and the smell of burnt coffee had soaked so deeply into the walls, no amount of scrubbing could pull it out. Marla stood alone behind the counter, watching the last of the sunset die behind the gas station across the street. The silence hit heavier than usual. She took off her apron slowly, folded it twice, then once more deliberately, like she was folding a flag after battle. No one knew it was her last night, not even herself, until that moment. There was no ceremony, no farewell, just the clang of the closed sign swinging against the glass and the soft hiss of fluorescent lights shutting down overhead. She walked out without looking back. In the trunk of her old Toyota sat a duffel bag with 2 sweaters, 1 framed photo, and $27 in change. The passenger seat held a gas station map from 1998 and a bottle of water she'd filled from the diner's tap. No plan, just west. Back when she was 17 and wild enough to think hitchhiking was romantic, she and her best friend Delia had circled a spot on that same map, a wide-open junction where the plains met the red dirt, marked only by the words, "Here." They said they'd go there one day, find out what kind of life might wait in a place that wasn't trying to hold them still. Delia made it to California. Marla made it as far as the diner. She passed the intersection now 28 years too late and didn't slow down. 2 hours later, under the fluorescent glow of a desert gas station canopy, Marla pulled off the road. Her eyelids ached. Her knuckles felt tight on the wheel. And then she saw her. A girl, maybe 19, sitting cross-legged on the curb, eating crackers straight from the box. Her coat was too thin for the night air. Her hair was shaved on one side, dyed magenta on the other. She didn't flinch as Marla stepped out of the car. Just kept eating, eyes on the horizon. "You waiting for someone?" Marla asked. "Nope," the girl said. "You okay?" "Nope." Marla hesitated, then pulled 2 paper cups of coffee from the station's machine and walked back. She held one out. The girl stared at it. "I could be dangerous." Marla shrugged. "So could I." That earned the tiniest twitch of a smile. They sat in silence for a minute. 2. Then the girl asked, "You running from something?" "No," Marla said, "just leaving something behind." The girl nodded, like she understood perfectly. And for the first time in a very long time, Marla didn't feel invisible. The coffee was terrible, but neither of them complained. They sat beneath the flickering blue and red sign of the Circle Fuel, the kind of gas station that sold hot dogs older than the cashier and bug spray next to candy bars. Trucks came and went. Music played low through a busted speaker above the pumps. Somewhere nearby, a stray dog barked once, then went silent. The girl pulled her knees into her chest and sipped. She didn't ask Marla's name. So Marla offered it. I'm Marla. A pause, then Tess. Real or made up? Marla asked, not unkindly. Tess cracked her knuckles. Does it matter? Marla smiled faintly. Only if you want it to. Tess looked like the kind of girl who'd been on the road longer than anyone should at her age. Bruises barely faded under sleeves, a jawline set too tight for comfort. But she didn't have the jittery look of someone on drugs or the swagger of someone faking strength. She just looked tired. Old tired, the kind that sits in your bones. You hungry? Marla asked. I'm always hungry. They ended up inside the gas station where Marla bought 2 pre-packed egg sandwiches, a warm soda, and a scratch-off ticket for no reason at all. The clerk, a pale guy with acne scars and a cross necklace, didn't ask questions, just rang it up and mumbled, "Good luck," as he handed her change. Back outside, Tess devoured the sandwich like it might vanish if she chewed too slow. Marla tore open the scratcher. 3 symbols in a row, nothing. What were you leaving behind? Tess asked suddenly. Her mouth was still half full. Marla glanced at her. A place I gave 30 years to. Was it worth it? Marla didn't answer right away. I thought so, but last night I looked around and realized no one would notice if I didn't show up tomorrow. That's how I knew. Tess nodded. Yeah, that's when you go. They finished eating in silence. Marla leaned back against her car. The sky above was beginning to gray, stars fading behind a layer of dusty cloud. She felt the pull of the road again, the ache of wanting to keep going, to outdrive everything that had piled up behind her. You got a place to go? Marla asked. Nope, Tess said again, but I know where I don't want to be. Marla didn't ask for details. Instead, she said, I know a spot. Old railway station, about an hour out. Used to stop there when I was young. Might still be quiet. You want a ride? Tess didn't answer right away. But after a moment she stood, dusted off her jeans, and said, Yeah, okay. They drove in silence for a while, past flatlands and scrub, rusted fences and barns with sagging roofs, the kind of nowhere that feels like it should be haunted by something, if not ghosts, then memory. Marla kept the windows cracked, letting the desert wind swirl in. Tess slept, head tilted toward the passenger door. A scar peeked out from beneath her collarbone, shaped like a half-moon. Just as the sun began to stretch over the horizon, they reached the old train station. It looked like a postcard, faded from time, wood peeling, platform cracked, one rusted bench, and a wide sky above it all. And yet, in its stillness, there was something almost holy. Tess stepped out and stared at it. This the place? Marla nodded. Where I almost ran away from everything. Once, then I didn't. Tess turned. So, why now? Marla's voice was steady. Because this time I'm not afraid of where I'll land. The bench was warped and splintered, but it held their weight. Marla and Tess sat shoulder to shoulder, sipping lukewarm coffee from the thermos Marla had tossed into the glove box a couple of weeks ago and forgotten about. It wasn't great, but it was warm, and that made it better than most things they'd had that week. A train hadn't passed through this station in over a decade. The tracks were rusted brown and choked with weeds, stretching out into nowhere like lines drawn for people who never arrived. Tess ran her fingers along the wooden slats of the bench, tracing the faded names and hearts carved into the backrest. "People sure love leaving their mark," she muttered. Marla leaned in. "That one there, Delia Jake, 1979. That was my best friend." "No kidding." "Dead serious. She was the bold one. Said we were gonna blow town together, start a pie stand in Venice Beach." Marla gave a soft laugh. "She left. I stayed. You ever hear from her?" "Couple letters, then postcards, then nothing." Tess didn't respond, but Marla saw the way she stared at the names like they might give her an answer she wasn't asking out loud. A wind kicked up, stirring dust and the scent of old wood and dried oil. "So, what now?" Tess asked. Marla shrugged. "We see who shows up, or we leave again." But someone did show up. A beat-up blue truck turned off the highway and rattled into the gravel lot beside the station. It parked crooked. A man climbed out, tall, rangy, with a cowboy hat and a beard gone mostly silver. He looked like he belonged to the land, like the dust had grown into him. Marla squinted. Her breath caught for a second. Then she stood. "Tucker?" The man shaded his eyes. "I'll be damned. Marla Jenkins." Tess blinked. "You know him?" Marla let out a low whistle. "I cooked him pie for 5 years before he ran off with a waitress." Tucker grinned, walking closer. "Best mistake of my life. The waitress, not the pie." They hugged, awkwardly but real. He smelled like motor oil and cedar. Marla hadn't seen him in 20 years, and still remembered exactly how he looked when he ordered cherry pie and told bad jokes until close. He looked at Tess, nodding. "Friend of yours?" "She's riding with me for now," Marla said simply. Tucker smiled. "Well, then, she's welcome too." He motioned to the truck. "Got a place couple miles west. Old ranch, still standing mostly. I come out this way every week to see if anyone's remembered the station. Figured one day you might." Marla looked at Tess. Tess looked at the road. "Want to see it?" Tucker asked. Tess stood, brushing off her hands. "Why not?" They got in the truck. Marla hesitated just before closing the door and turned back to the bench. With her key, she scratched a fresh line beneath all the old names. MJ came back. The road to Tucker's ranch was little more than a memory stitched into the land gravel, worn thin, lined with wild grass and the ghosts of fences long collapsed. Dust curled behind the truck like a ribbon unraveling into the sunrise. In the back seat, Tess leaned her forehead against the window, eyes half-lidded, lost in thought or sleep, Marla couldn't tell. Tucker drove like a man who never needed directions. One hand on the wheel, the other resting on the windowsill, fingers tapping to a rhythm that didn't play on the radio. The ranch appeared like a half-told story, 3 buildings, all leaning different ways. A barn with a caved-in roof, a chicken coop without chickens, and a house, white paint flaking like old sunburn, one shutter missing, the porch sagging in the middle. But the chimney was clean, and a dog bowl sat on the steps. Tucker killed the engine. "Ain't much," he said, "but it's mine." Marla stepped out. The air smelled of mesquite and dust and something faintly sweet like dried wildflowers. She'd grown up around houses like this, places where the world moved slower, but people didn't. Where work started before dawn and ended long after your back gave out. Tess stood beside her, silent. "You hungry?" Tucker asked. Tess nodded automatically. Inside, the kitchen was better than expected. Worn but clean. A cast-iron skillet on the stove, a calendar with a page half torn, a coffee can full of utensils, and a radio that crackled without ever truly speaking. They ate quietly scrambled eggs and buttered toast. Tess devoured hers, then blinked like she couldn't believe food could be warm and real. After breakfast, Tucker disappeared out back with a toolbox, saying something about a windmill motor. Marla washed the dishes, Tess dried. The routine felt old and sacred. Then Marla opened a cabinet. Inside, a stack of notebooks, each marked with a month and year. The handwriting on the spines was familiar. Too familiar. She pulled one down. Inside were drawings, pie crusts, tables, the layout of the Dixie Belle diner, and notes. Little phrases like, "She always cuts the edges with a fork. Don't forget extra cinnamon, she never says it, but notices. Cherry pie means she's thinking of her daughter." Tess leaned over. "What is that?" Marla's voice dropped. "That's me." Tucker's notebook was full of her. Years of it. Observations, details, memories of the way she moved behind a counter or tapped the edge of a pan twice before sliding it into the oven. A mix of affection and something else. Remorse, maybe? Tess blinked. "Did he ever tell you?" "No." Marla closed the notebook gently. "He didn't have to." "Outside," Tucker called out. "Pump's jammed. Anyone feel like giving me a hand?" Tess turned to Marla. "You want to stay here?" Marla thought about it, then said, "I want to know why I was remembered," and walked out the door. The pump sat at the edge of the property, a rusted metal spine jutting out of dry earth, flanked by old tire tracks and wild sunflowers. It creaked as the wind shifted, sounding like something between a moan and a sigh. Tucker was already elbow-deep in the motor housing, a wrench in one hand, a smear of grease across his forearm. "Thought you disappeared," he said without looking up. "I was reading," Marla replied. He paused. "Which one?" "The one about cinnamon." Tucker looked at her now. Really looked. The way someone does when they know the past has walked into the room and sat down at the table. "I didn't mean for you to find those," he said. "I know." Silence stretched between them, taut as a clothesline. Tess stood off to the side, pretending to inspect the sky. Tucker finally wiped his hands and sat on an overturned bucket. "I wrote them when I didn't have the nerve to talk to you. Figured if I couldn't say what I meant, I could at least remember how you stirred sugar without measuring." "You always watched me," Marla said softly. "Yeah," he admitted, "but I never figured out how to say I missed you until you were gone." Marla knelt beside the pump, running her hand along the cool metal. "You didn't miss me. You missed the idea of me." He didn't deny it. "You ever think of writing to me?" she asked. "Every week." "Then why didn't you?" "I didn't think you'd answer." Marla stood up, brushed the dust from her knees. "You were right." He chuckled, low and sad. "Fair enough." The pump groaned again as wind blew harder. It smelled like a storm was brewing, somewhere far away, not here yet, but coming. Tess kicked a pebble with her boot. "So what now? You gonna yell at each other or kiss and cry or something?" Marla smirked. "Neither." Tucker stood too. She's not the crying kind. No, Marla agreed, but I am the baking kind. Back at the house, she found a bag of flour behind the canned beans and a half-used stick of butter in the fridge. No rolling pin, she used an old wine bottle. No proper pie tin, she found a cast-iron skillet and lined it by feel. Tess watched from the doorway, arms crossed. You're seriously doing this now? Marla looked up. This is how I make peace. Later, when the crust had browned and the smell of cinnamon filled the house, Marla cut 3 slices. They ate them in silence at the kitchen table, the wind pushing gently at the windows, as if asking to come in. Tess took a bite, closed her eyes, then whispered, "This tastes like someone gave a damn." Marla met her gaze. "Maybe," she said. "That's the point." The next morning, the sky was the color of worn denim. No clouds, just that soft, faded blue that made everything feel like it was holding its breath. Tess sat cross-legged on the front steps, sipping the last of the coffee from the chipped mug with the rooster on it. Marla stood in the kitchen, staring at the pie crust crumbs on the table like they were clues she'd forgotten how to read. Tucker was out by the barn, his hammer tapping steady and low, like a metronome keeping time for lives that didn't move in rhythm anymore. Marla opened the drawer next to the stove, looking for a notepad. Instead, she found a stack of envelopes tied with string. They weren't new. Some had yellowed. Some were dog-eared. All were sealed. Her name was written on every one. Marla Jenkins, Dixie Belle Diner, Caldwell, Texas. She untied the bundle with fingers that didn't feel like hers. The first letter was dated June 3rd, 2007. Marla, the waitress is gone. She was never you. T. The second. Marla, I still stop by the diner's back lot just to smell the bread when I pass through town. You always let the rolls burn a little. I miss that. Some were longer, some just fragments. None had stamps. She didn't count how many, but she read them all, one by one, sitting on the floor, her back against the cabinet, the sun cutting a thin gold line across her knees. When she was done, she took a breath so deep she felt it in her ribs. Tess walked in. "You okay?" Marla didn't answer right away. She picked up the stack and handed it to her. "He wrote these." Tess flipped through a few, brows furrowed. "You never got them?" "No, he never mailed them. Probably never even meant to, but he wrote them anyway." Tess sat beside her. "That's something, though, that he tried." Marla looked at her. "You ever write something you didn't send?" Tess gave a slow nod. "Once, to someone I never wanted to see again. Told her I forgave her, even if I didn't." They were quiet a moment. Then Marla said, "Would you stay another day?" Tess hesitated. "You sure you want me to?" "I think this house needs someone who knows how to run, and someone who knows when to stop." From outside, Tucker shouted, "I think the windmill's finally working." Marla stood and dusted off her jeans. "Let's go see what else still turns." Tucker had indeed fixed the windmill, or at least made it spin. The creaky blades turned slowly against the sky, throwing a long, lazy shadow across the pasture. The pump beneath it sputtered, coughed, and finally spat out a thin, uneven stream of water into the rusted trough. "Still works," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Kinda like me. Marla smirked. I wouldn't go that far. Tess kicked a rock into the dirt. So what did you two used to be anyway? A thing, not a thing? Marla leaned against the fence post. We were something. Long shifts, late coffee, jokes over clean plates, a dance that never made it to the floor, Tucker added. And then I blinked, and 10 years passed. Yeah, Marla said. That sounds about right. They walked back toward the house slowly, letting the sun chase their shadows down the path. Tess hung back a little, pulling her hoodie tighter. When they reached the porch, she stopped. Can I ask you something? Tess said, her voice quieter than usual. Of course, Marla replied. Cool. Why me? Why let me ride with you? Marla looked at her, really looked. Not as a stranger on the curb, or a runaway, or someone broken. Just a person. Because you didn't ask for anything, she said. But you needed something, and I know how that feels. Tess blinked. Her eyes went glassy, but she looked away fast, pretending to stretch her arms. They spent the afternoon cleaning. Marla took on the kitchen like it was a battlefield she knew by heart, sorting, scrubbing, tossing out old spices that smelled like cardboard and jars with labels faded to nothing. She found a tin of dried lavender in the back of the cabinet and set it by the window. Tucker worked on the porch, replacing rotted planks. Tess took the laundry line and fixed its snapped cord, stringing it tight between the old apple tree and a bent nail by the shed. At some point, someone put on music old country, the kind with steel guitars and too much ache in the vocals. It filled the space without asking for attention, like good company. As the sky blushed orange, Marla opened the last drawer in the hallway. Inside was her apron. Folded neatly, the stitched blue heart still intact. She hadn't realized she'd left it there. Years ago, maybe during the last time she and Tucker had tried to be something. She picked it up, held it close. Tess walked by and paused. That yours? It was. Tess tilted her head. You gonna take it with you? Marla ran her fingers over the stitching. No, she said. I think I already did. She placed it back in the drawer, not forgotten, not discarded, just no longer needed. That night they ate by candlelight not for romance, but because the kitchen light had finally given out. Tucker promised to fix it tomorrow or the tomorrow after that, and no one argued. They passed bowls hand to hand. Nothing fancy. Beans, cornbread, a tomato sliced with salt. But the laughter came easy, the kind that starts low, then builds without warning. Tess laughed the hardest, not loud, but freely, like it was a new language finally unlocked. After the plates were cleared, Marla stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky smeared with stars. She stood at the edge of the porch and looked out at the field, now silver under moonlight. A coyote howled far off, thin and distant. The windmill clicked every few seconds like it was keeping time. She thought about the diner, about 30 years of grease and orders and half-heard stories. She thought about people who came in every day and how she never really knew most of them, even though she fed them like family. Then she thought about this place, this moment. Behind her, inside the house, she heard Tess's voice and Tucker's deep, patient reply. She smiled. Marla went back in and opened the hallway drawer. The apron still lay folded, the heart as blue as ever. She smoothed a hand over it. and left it there. The next morning, the house stirred slowly. Tucker was already outside, his boots scuffing gravel. Tess yawned and wandered into the kitchen with pillow lines still etched on her face. Marla was gone, but on the table was a note written in clear, careful script. Tess, the world may not hand you much, but you get to choose what you carry. This place carries you now, if you'll let it. M. Tess held the note for a long time, then looked at the drawer. She opened it. The apron was still there. She ran her fingers over the stitching, not claiming it, not wearing it, just feeling its warmth. She hadn't left without a trace. She'd simply left the one that mattered, because sometimes the greatest thing we can leave behind isn't a legacy or a place or even a name, but the courage for someone else to stay when we finally learn how to go. This story isn't just about leaving, it's about what we choose to leave behind. Tell us, which moment touched you the most? And what would you have left in that drawer if it were your goodbye?